your hobbies, maybe. Yeah.
Oh, you're recording. Hi, everybody.
Ready?
Yeah. Garrett, hello.
Yes. How are you, Sebastian?
Hello. I'm fine. What about you?
Good. Doing well.
Okay, Can you introduce yourself real quick?
Me?
Yeah, right.
I'm going to introduce myself after everybody else introduces themselves. So I like to let people, we do a social the first 15 minutes of the event. So if
Okay, all
people
right.
want to introduce themselves, and maybe you can start, Sebastian, and people can introduce themselves, what brings them to tonight's topic, and then
We already did that. We already did that. We don't do that a second time, but we go on with Howard. Howard, hello.
Hi, I'm 61. I live in Melbourne, Australia. I was raised modern Orthodox Jewish and Zionist, and I'm no longer either. So I have a lot of perspective from both sides on the issue, which I'm happy to share.
All right. Thank you. Suvi?
Hi, how are you?
Sebastian, is there some
Yeah.
reason that you're taking on the host role?
Me?
It's my room. I'm the owner. Why?
No, it's not your room.
It is. Why? Who are you? Garrett Lang?
Okay. So he is not the host.
Hey Garrett, I just want to tell you that you're a little pussy and I like you. And
If
yeah.
you need help, Elias, I'm happy to coach you. Reach out to me. I'm really sorry that this is what you do for fun. It's got to be a sad life. We get Zoom bombers here, so luckily they identified themselves pretty early on. Anyone want to introduce themselves and what brings them to tonight's event? Katie has her hand up. Go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, well, those are German kids, so that was they're maximizing their impact. I went to a meeting on Sunday, and I remember getting interested about it because someone was reacting to something that was said, and I just felt like for me, I would have to go to something that I don't know how many meetups would it be? Would it be 50 to 100 meetups before I could really start to share an opinion on things? They were objecting to the use of a word, and I really wanted them to also compare, like, because Israel is it's a situation where there's a security issue too. Like some of the things that they do are also out of security, so you can't really compare. Sometimes, like it, people might use the word occupation, and I want to also compare against other countries where you'd use the word occupation, and compare against other countries where you'd use the word where there's also a security issue, because you can't separate it out from all the sub issues.
Yeah, I guess when you say use a word and then it's a security issue, you're saying that certain words are considered security issues when they're used.
I'm saying, like, someone might use the word occupation. Someone was just saying, oh, they're occupying, but I was just like, well, I'm not sure that it's an occupation if there's a security issue. If some of the things are being done.
Oh, you're talking about the settlements.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that'll be interesting. We'll get into that in the conversation. I'm not going to cover, I'll cover a little bit of the settlements in the presentation, but not a ton. So Ben, go ahead.
Hi Garrett, my name is Ben. Thanks for having the this forum again.
Yeah, thanks for coming. And what interests you in this topic?
I'm actually strongly interested in all kinds of colonialism, and this to me is a textbook example.
Got it. Thanks. Anyone else want to introduce themselves and what interests them in the topic?
I could do that. You hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my name is Sufi. I had a feeling this would be very group. I was like, I want to balance it out and try to propose an opposing opinion. I'm actually Palestinian, so I was interested for that reason.
Cool. And you thought it was going to be what kind of group? You broke up there, sorry.
I don't know, I assumed it would be a very Israel supporting type of group. Just wanted to see if I could, offer some balance in that regard.
I want balance. I want pro-Israel, pro-Palestine, and everything in between. So we want to get lots of ideas out there and share ideas in a polite way and hear different perspectives and really understand why other people have a perspective other than our own. I'll present a perspective, when I present, but I'll welcome all perspectives in the dialogue portion, the Q&A portion at the end. And what was your name again?
Who, me? The guy who's speaking?
Yeah, Sufi. Okay, thanks.
I did meet you before. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, I do remember you. Sorry, I just didn't remember. There's a lot of people on the screen, so I didn't remember your name.
Garrett, I have a question. This is Jenny.
Yeah, Jenny.
Something strange has happened. I was trying to come into your meeting, I don't know, because I was just available 15 minutes earlier, and this very young kid was hosting, and a couple of 4 or 5 other people who were just quite strange. Like I'm the host, he said, and he was asking people their age.
Yeah, don't worry, Jenny. He was a troll bomber, and I booted him. So.
Oh, you mean they could just come in and create their start having a meeting
I mean, they were pretending to have power, but they didn't have power. They weren't actually hosts. If you looked at the names of the people in the meeting, they were
right. It was quite odd. I just never experienced anything like that, so I didn't know what was going on. I sent you a note. I said, Garen, are you having a meeting tonight?
If you go to look at the meeting attendees, you'll see next to me it says host, and actually I need to make Will a co-host, and then I'll make a bunch of other hosts. But yeah, he was a troll bomber. So good to see you, Jenny, and Will. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Garrett. Yeah, so I'm Will. I'm in Queensland, Australia, subtropical paradise, renting out rooms, reasonable rates, only charge slightly extra for water and electricity. And I'm interested in this meeting because even the title is representative of one of my concerns, and that's which side should we pick? And I see that they're both committing atrocities. Little babies are dying, little kids are hiding terrified under their beds. Both sides are guilty of absolute inhumanity, yet we still want to pick a side. And every time we talk about this in regular meetings now, it's coming up, people just pick a side. Very few people say both sides are wrong. And this is, I think, one of the problems with the world. We get so polarized and we pick a side when both sides are committing atrocities.
Well, I think you'll like my presentation then, Will, because I'm not going to pick a side. I'm going to say both sides are wrong. So, but we're getting to the answer before we've given the argument. I'm going to give a logical argument before I say that. And both sides are also right in some respects. So I don't want to say that they're both all wrong. They both have legitimate perspectives, but I want to represent both as best I can, and look from a solutions perspective at how we can find common ideals and values rather than look at the way that people are dividing, because I agree with you, Will, what's wrong. But I also wanted to attract people tonight that do want to pick sides, and I want to try to explain to them why maybe picking sides isn't the right answer. And I'll try to make a logical argument for that, and people can in the Q&A try to give me a reason why we should pick sides, but I'll try to give a reason that we shouldn't pick sides. We should, look for a solution rather than trying to pick sides. So that said, thanks for your comments, Will. Much appreciated and very much in agreement. Joe, how are you? Good to see you, buddy.
See you, Garrett. Hello, everyone. I'm Joe Bullock. I'm actually just outside of Philadelphia. And my interest in this discussion is to know if there's anybody here that has firsthand knowledge as to what is going on, because I think it's sometimes we tend to make judgments from afar, and actually knowing the ground and just not necessarily speculating on what the reports are in the news is, I think, to be more important than just coming up with our own solutions. I like to hear firsthand accounts if possible. I do have opinions as well, and I would like to talk about path forward, and instead of rehashing history continuously as well. So that would be, my two reasons as to why I would really like to be here. Yeah, so every time I enter into this type of discussion, I really appreciate it when people have firsthand knowledge.
Thanks. I do have friends in both Palestine and Israel. I don't know if anyone, we have a Palestinian here that Sufi mentioned, he's Palestinian. I don't know if anyone here is actually in Palestine or Israel, because it would be pretty unusual hours there to be here. So I don't think we do, but if anyone is, I would love to hear that. But I'm not going to go into in the presentation as much things that I've heard from people there, because it's not it's mostly like me checking in to make sure that everybody is safe on both sides. So I don't have a lot of unique insights from the people that I know there to share. But that said, I'll let Howard go because he's got his hand up.
Yeah, just taking on the point that Joe just made. Generally, that's a good approach, and I don't have a problem with having that as an addition. However, you don't actually need a particular person to be present in a meeting to present that. There's a lot of testimony which has been accumulated by historians and journalists, which you can find online to give you perspectives, and we can quote those here. The other difficulty is, even if you have an eyewitness, they're biased, and also they're not privy to a lot of the really important information, because they're reliant on news media from their own country. In Israel at the moment, for example, the news media is actually censoring a lot of the information, and we're actually getting a better picture of it here outside Israel than within Israel. If you want a perspective from Israelis who actually have been on the ground, you should go to, for example, a group like Breaking the Silence, which is a group of thousands of ex-Israelis and current Israeli soldiers who have served in the occupation, who are willing to speak out about it.
Thank you. And I forget the name of the organization that I knew. I'm going to try to Google it. I'm going to let Victor go, and then I'm going to try to Google the organization. Victor, go ahead.
Okay, I'm here because this is one of the most unsettling events, I think, in my life. I'm part Jewish. This is this moment in Israeli and Palestinian history is equal in weight to 1948 or to 1967. And there's almost always a lack of context in these discussions. So I'm here to, if I can, given how many people are here, I think it would be very difficult to try to provide some context. But what I'm witnessing are, if we ever actually had international law, and we do not, then the leaders of Hamas would be prosecuted for the killing of civilian non-combatants, and the leaders of Israel, the war cabinet of Netanyahu, would be prosecuted for war crimes, crimes against humanity, collective punishment, violations of international humanitarian law, and of course the crime of apartheid, which has been named in detailed studies by Amnesty International, by Human Rights Watch, by Bet Salem, which is the main human rights organization in Israel, by Ehud Barak, former prime minister, by Ehud Olmert, who was a former Likudnik, who has also spoken of apartheid on the West Bank, as well as just recently a former head of Mossad. So if you do not have a context of how Israel came into being, which was through the ethnic cleansing of between 700 and 1,000 and 830,000 Palestinians in 1948, if you do not know that there are actually documents of the Haganah that show that this was intended and planned between March of 1947 and March of 1948. If you do not know that another 300,000 some odd Palestinians were ethnically cleansed in 1967, and then 500,000 between 67 and 2023, and now, according to the last estimate, 1.87 million Palestinians have been removed from their homes, and the homes of more than 1 million human beings have been flattened. While the leaders of Netanyahu's government have spoken of flattening Gaza, erasing Gaza, making it unfit for human beings. And just 2 days ago, the deputy mayor of Jerusalem said that the Palestinian prisoners that are now being held by Israel should be buried alive. So, here's just the last bit of context. Two Israeli Holocaust scholars, one of them at Brown University, Omer Bartov, and one Roz Siegel, who teaches in a university in New Jersey, have both said that there's clear signs of genocidal intent on the part of Israel. We're moving from genocide.
Finish your thoughts if you could, Victor.
We're moving into from genocidal intent into genocide because of the number of Palestinians who are about to die because of lack of water, lack of food, lack of medicine, and lack of humanitarian aid being allowed into Gaza.
Thanks, Victor. You added a little more context around the origins of Israel. I have a little bit as well. I am going to try to ground this in a historical knowledge of the situation, but obviously this is a millennia old situation, and I won't have all the history covered. But thanks for sharing your points. Jameson, go ahead.
Thank you, Garrett. Yeah, I'm actually here. I apologize, I missed the beginning. I'm assuming you want to know why we're here, and you're trying to.
Yeah, we're just introducing ourselves, where you're connecting from, and what interests you in the topic, actually. Yeah, and we're gonna just let people with their hands up go, and then I'm gonna start the presentation after that.
You got it. Yeah, I'm here to get some context for sure. My interest is in acquiring information. In addition to going to Fox News and NBC or other outlets, I come to places like this. And I like coming here to be able to engage in conversation and hear other people's opinions. And I also have an interest, obviously, in history. So, for instance, I don't want to focus just on the one factor of someone's selection of video viewing that they placed in the comments for this meeting today. And it was about the issue of free speech and leadership in our universities. And I just wanted to find out along several dimensions. One, in the Knesset in Israel, I think it's openly okay to discuss genocidal activities related to a particular group of people and even specific individuals from the news media that I've consumed on that side. And then when I consume media on this side, I haven't really heard, death to Israel or in any form or fashion, any of the outlets that I consume information from. So just that phenomena in and of itself being presented in that, I'm just going to say it, propaganda of that video, I would just like to hear other people's opinions on something like that, to get perspective. So, putting things in context and getting perspective from other people. And then historical is important for me too, because I really want to lay it down for, understanding that how we put this down and understand it, it's going to be how we look back on it and view it. So, whether it's genocide or ethnic cleansing, that's a point of contention that I'd like to get people's opinions on, just those type of things.
Great, thanks. We have a lot of hands up. Just gonna ask people to keep it, like, I wanna get into the presentation and the conversation afterwards, which is the most fun part. Let's just keep it to less than 30 seconds each for the hands that are up. Jameson, I think you just went, right? Yeah, so Emma, go ahead.
Oh, hi, my name is Emma. I'm on the coordinating committee for Jewish Voice for Peace in my city. And I'm also the president of my synagogue. I think Israel has committed numerous war crimes, and Israel needs to back out of Gaza and the ceasefire and make reparations. And I'm very sad about all of the people who were murdered by Hamas. Hamas also needs to be prosecuted.
Thanks, Emma. Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be super quick. Something what interests me is like media, and I would say lobby influence here in the US. I've been following it closely for years, and I'll just throw out a little teaser. November 2020, Trump gave a radio interview somewhere on the East Coast, and his exact words were, Israel lobby owns Congress. You could find it yourself. I'm not making this up. You could look it up. Israel or Israel lobbies owns Congress, pause, and rightfully so. That was November 2020. He was less than a year out of office. So you just had the former president of the United States, regardless of what you think of him, and I'm not a Trump fan, that is totally irrelevant. He can say the sky is blue, and it's true, however much you dislike him. He just said a foreign country owned, not influence, owned Congress, and no media, no major media, we all know what I mean when I say that, CNN, Fox, and so on, even touched it. There was nothing. He just said a foreign government owned Congress, and there's nothing.
Thanks, Kevin.
I'll let you guys figure it out.
Yeah, I'll highly encourage you to look at fact check analysis of Trump, because the last I checked, over 95% of what he says is either completely not true or mostly not true. So if Trump said it, it's actually more likely to not be true than it is to be true. With all due respect, if he said the sky was blue, I would believe him, but that comment I would take with a grain of salt. That said, AF, quick intro, what interests you in the topic, and then we'll get started on the presentation.
Sure. Thank you. I just want to say I read the description of the event, and the question was which side we should take. Should we be on the Palestinian side or the Israeli side? And I just want to say that myself, I grew up in a Muslim country. However, I feel like we don't really have to take a side. We have to be fair with both sides, because there were mistakes and blunders committed by both sides. You can even say that crimes were committed by both sides, both sort of like Hamas or Palestinians in Israelis. So we just look at it as it is and call them out when they do something that is illegal, that is a war crime, that is a crime. And yeah, that's all that I had to say.
Great, thank you. That is exactly what I'm going to do. I put the description more to attract people who are picking sides, rather than because that was my belief is that we should pick sides. Stephen has his hand up, so very quick intro, Stephen, and then we're going to get started on the presentation.
Hi, Stephen from Australia. There's a few other Australians here, so I'll have my own perspective. I'm not a sort of believer in absolute rights of any sort. There's a lot of very passionate belief in that area. So I'm curious. I'm more a Hume is an ought man. I know there's a lot of oughts in the universe, and I tend to believe in the is. And I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stephen. I'm gonna have to do an event on the why I don't think Hume's guillotine is actually accurate. Like, I don't think it's a real problem, but we'll save that for another night. So George, very quick. We're 10 minutes behind starting the presentation.
Yes, thank you. You know, what I would submit is that the Zionism, sadly, is in the anti-Enlightenment, which is to say that
George, just what interests you in the topic rather than an opinion right now. We're going to do the presentation, and then we'll give.
Allow me just to say this. Allow me. I mean, I'm sorry. Just give me a second to build up to something. Just please. I understand your point, but let me build up. I'm making an important point. I believe, which is to say that truth is nothing more than something to be played with. Lies are acceptable, and so that's the fundamental issue, in my opinion. That Zionism. I think the central core. Let me just make this point. The central core lie is that Arabs hate Jews. That's the lie. Jews lived in the Middle East with Arabs, with Muslims for centuries and centuries and centuries. So, I mean, to me, that's the biggest lie perpetrated by Zionism. And so I just want to say that. Thank you very much.
Thanks. So, Moshe, less than 20 seconds, please. I really want to get started with the presentation. This will be the last intro.
Yes, so I'm an Israeli, and of course I support Israel, and it was kind interesting to hear all the comments of everybody about their knowledge about history and who is right and who is wrong. And that's it.
Great, thank you. Good to have you here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to present a little bit of the history. I'm sure there will be people here who know plenty of history that they can share in the Q&A portion of the session. I won't claim that everything that I present is a complete history of a multi-thousand-year history, but I'll do the best that I can to provide some grounding and a little bit of trying to look for answering the question of who is right. And I've already kind of said that I'm not going to pick who I think is right exactly. I'm going to say what I think about each side's areas of being right and wrong. So agenda-wise, we have a big agenda, so I'm going to try to go through this quickly. I will try to speak reasonably fast, but I don't want to speak too fast that people can't understand me. I'm going to talk about a history of the region where Israel is located, the sources of conflict. I'll talk a little bit about the recent Hamas attack and the Israeli response, about the international response to that. Then I'm going to go into a little bit of the history of attempts historically to solve the Israel-Palestinian conflict, and what I think is the right path going forward. I'm going to present. I'm going to talk about who's winning hearts and minds and why Judaism and Islam both teach that peace is the answer to this conundrum. And I'm going to propose a solution of how I think we could end the conflict. And, I like people who have come to my past events know that I like to try to solve intractable problems. So I'm going to make my effort to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict here tonight in this Zoom session. And obviously I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to make a proposal. So that said, history of the land where Israel is located. According to the Bible, Israel is where Israel is located now is the ancient homeland of the Jewish people. Muslims have been there for just as long, but Romans dispersed the Jews away from Israel in the during the time of the Roman Empire, and so there was no Jewish state for thousands of years up until World War I, and we'll get into that. Interestingly, like, Jews have been persecuted pretty much everywhere they've gone, and largely gone on to very successful lives in the places that they were persecuted. Although I will say, to Spain's credit, Spain was one of the places that Jews, Christians, and Muslims all got along well for a period of time. I think that was actually the time of Muslim rule, to be quite frank. where there was peace.
And
then-
Garrett,
yeah.
and Iran also.
What about and Iran?
Spain and Iran.
Iran, thank you. I didn't know that Iran had the
Persia.
same. If you don't
From the
mind,
beginning of-
hold questions. I really appreciate that comment, but if you guys could just hold questions and comments till the end, definitely write them down, and make the points. Sorry, give me 1 second.
Garrett,
Yeah.
would you like me to moderate?
Yeah. Did you have something else did I forget to say something? Go ahead.
No, but if you don't want to be the one to speak to people, I can do it unless you prefer to do it yourself.
No, I mean, like, I'm fine jumping in where needed, and then
Okay.
where if I ever don't, feel free to. So we can tag team.
Okay.
So the traditional view of Judaism was that the Jews should return to Israel when in the Messianic era, when the Messiah comes. But there was a lot of a persecution of Jews in Europe until the late 19th century. And so Zionism, the idea that Jews should go back to the Israeli homeland, was kind of looked at as a way of escaping the persecution of Jews in Europe by giving Jews a place to live, that they wouldn't be persecuted, a Jewish state, even though the Messiah hadn't been seen yet. So in World War I, the British government basically issued something called the Balfour Declaration, with support from the famous and sometimes infamous Rothschild family, where they expressed support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in what was then Palestine. After World War I, the League of Nations basically granted Britain control over Palestine, and they allowed Jews to immigrate there alongside Arab Palestinians. Created tensions. It sounded like someone had some information that I didn't have in my research, that there was maybe some ethnic cleansing going on there. We can talk about that in the conversation portion, and I can do some further fact checking, but I just didn't uncover that in my research. So the United Nations, I knew there was tension, but I didn't hear about that. So the United Nations partition, basically in 1947, because there were rising tensions between Jews and Arabs, the UN created a partition of Jewish states versus Arab states. In 1948, the state of Israel was formed as British control over the area was about to go away, and so they formed the state of Israel. Arab nations invaded immediately, but Israel won the war. It may also be worth mentioning, this isn't totally directly related to the conversation, but it's probably tangentially relevant, is that the Arab nations agreed to come on into World War II on the side of the Allies under one condition, that there would be one Arab nation formed at the end of World War II. But instead of the Allies actually following through with their agreement, they carved the Arab nations up in a Machiavellian way and tried to put in place puppet governments to control them. So there was a little bit of, political tension caused by the way that the Arab states were handled post-World War II. Jewish settlements in the Palestinian territory. So there are walled cities, for those that aren't familiar, I guess most people here are, where there are walled cities of Jews living in Palestinian occupied territories, which is generally considered, the 1967 borders created after the Six-Day War, where basically a bunch of Arab nations tried to invade, I think it was 6 or 7 nations tried to invade Israel, and within 6 days, Israel, basically won the war. Those borders were considered the internationally accepted borders, and there are still the borders and the settlements in Gaza were removed in 2005, but there are still settlements in other parts of Palestine to this day, and at least the story, and this is something that I hear from on the ground from a friend of mine in Palestine, is they say that the Jewish, and given this is from a Palestinian perspective, so they're biased, but she's a pretty honest person, but she says that the the Palestinian settlements can be violent towards locals, and that they're, let's say, not amicable neighbors with the local Palestinians. So Israel claims that they own the Golan Heights, which is not recognized by international law, just like the settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem are not considered legal by international law. Sources of conflict. So someone is, I guess I forgot to turn off the whiteboards. Let me remove the drawing. Okay. So by the way, I'm not going to see anything in the chat while I'm talking. So if someone needs my attention, just speak up. And of course, I'm annotating now myself. Let's close that. And there we go. So basically, sources of conflict. So Hamas owns Gaza. They're basically, by most countries, considered a terrorist organization, including the US. Because movement in and out of Gaza, a region basically governed by a terrorist organization, is dangerous. Israel controls the borders for safety reasons very carefully. There's been a water blockade by Egypt and Israel since 2007, which severely limits trade, makes it very poor in the Palestinian territories. In the West Bank, there's a network of Israeli military checkpoints and barriers and walls that limit trade as well. And so the Palestinian economy is very dependent on the Israeli economy. Palestinians have regularly launched rocket attacks against Israel, who has a missile defense system to protect Israel as best as possible from those missile attacks. I forget the name of it. Someone will mention it in the chat. Very recent history, for anyone that hasn't been under a rock, we all know that Hamas basically created a military incursion into Israel, capturing, raping, and killing about a little over 1,100 Israelis, with the count that I got. Israel then launched a major counteroffensive against Hamas. And while their focus has been on killing military strongholds, there were over 18,000 Palestinian casualties, with large portions of the population having been driven from their homes. And so, the potential for casualties, as was mentioned in the social, is much higher because of the amount of damage done to the buildings in Gaza and the infrastructure in Gaza. So who's right? That was the flippant name of tonight's event. Was Hamas right for killing innocent Israeli civilians? I hope we can agree, no, that is not right. No matter what wrongs Israel has done, terrorist incursions are not the way to solve a problem. And does anyone think that Israel's incursion into Gaza, killing over 18,000 Palestinians in response to the a little over 1,100 lives in Israel, is going to make Israel right, even though they were trying to remove the terrorist leaders? I would say, no, I don't think that was the right response. And I'll go into what I think would have been the right response. And I also think it was a counterproductive response. And I'll go into why in a little bit. So more likely, it'll solidify support for Hamas. Even if the current Hamas leaders are all killed by the military, new ones are going to rise up. So, Israel's incursion into Gaza, to me, is not a winning strategy. It's a losing strategy. That said, I do think, one of my friends came up with a hypothesis that I'm going to share with you guys. I didn't do a slide for it, but his hypothesis was that or maybe I don't think I did a slide for it. But basically, his hypothesis was that Hamas knew that Israel would have a heavy-handed response and intentionally, did the incursion with the hopes that huge numbers of Palestinian civilians would be killed in order to solidify international support for Palestine, which is a pretty brutal way to look at it, but he's a pretty like matter of fact kind of guy. And I think that there could be truth to that. And if so, Israel played right into that plan, if that was their plan. That said, international response, the UN, you're welcome to raise hands. We're going to save questions till the end of the presentation. I don't have a lot more to go through, but another 5 or 10 slides. So the UN tried to pass a resolution for a ceasefire. The US vetoed that resolution, but the reason they did is because it didn't condemn Hamas's attack on Israel. I would argue the UN should have revised the resolution to condemn Hamas's attack, because as well as that is Israel's response in order to broker a ceasefire, because you want to, when someone does something like veto a resolution for a ceasefire in a situation like this, you want to take away all of their reasons. I guess I should say our reasons, since I'm a US citizen, but I'm not in support of the veto of the ceasefire. That said, international consensus is that the Israel-Palestinian conflict should be solved diplomatically, and I agree. UN experts warn that there could be a genocide against Palestinians, as was mentioned by in the social, and that it could be turning into that relatively shortly. Many human rights organizations have said it's a huge humanitarian crisis in Gaza. A UN peace force has been proposed, but if the US vetoed a resolution for a ceasefire, I don't see how they would not veto a UN peace force from being brought in, although I would like to see that. A little bit of background about Israeli politics, if I can mention it. When Israel was founded, it was mostly it was a majority secular Jews, and it was politically left-leaning. There were a lot of socialist kibbutzes, like communal farming type of establishments in Israel at the time. But over the last 50 years, religious Jews have had a lot more children. And so now religious Jews outnumber the secular Jews. And so the government has become much more right-leaning. And so right now, the current government is very right-wing. And that is probably a part of why the response was so strong militarily, because that's a belief of the military leaning right-wing government. So proposed solution, the most popular solution proposed is really called the two-state solution, which is where Palestine and Israel recognize each other as independent states. Palestine doesn't recognize Israel as a country. Palestine isn't really a country. It's just occupied territories is what it's considered. So let's talk about the proposals that have been made and why they've been rejected and by whom and who rejected them. So 1947 United Nations Partition Plan was a British mandate of Palestine into an Arab state and a Jewish state. The Palestinian response plan was rejected by the Arab Higher Committee because it was seen as unfair, where most of the land was going to a Jewish minority and overlooking the right of self-determination by the Palestinian majority. In 2000, there was a Camp David summit, and the Prime Minister of Israel basically said the Palestinians can create a state in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, while Israel would control over the major settlement blocks. But Yasser Arafat of Palestine rejected that because he wanted sovereignty over East Jerusalem, and he didn't feel he had control over the borders. And he was concerned about the state of Palestinian refugees, which Palestinians, I believe, want to go back to Israel. This is refugees that had to leave Israel, and so where would yeah. So plans 3 and 4 in 2001 and 2002, basically the 2001 summit ended without agreement because there was a lot of domestic politics, and the second uprising occurred then, and in the Arab Peace Initiative was a proposal by the Arab nations, basically proposed by Saudi Arabia and endorsed by the Arab League, basically saying we're going to have a peaceful coexistence between Israel and Palestine along with a complete withdrawal of, but it had to be in exchange for a complete withdrawal from all the occupied territories, and a just settlement of the Palestinian refugee crisis. Now, Israel didn't want to fully withdraw from East Jerusalem and did not want to allow Palestinian refugees to come back to Israel. So Israel rejected the Arab Peace Initiative. The one that I like the best personally is the Roadmap for Peace, although I think the last one was very good as well. But we need to find a solution, in my opinion, that makes both Israelis and Palestinians happy. And the Roadmap for Peace, I think, was an attempt to do that. This was by the U.S. I don't always side with the U.S., even though I'm from the U.S. Even people who have come to past events know I'm very critical of the U.S. in many, many ways. But I do think that this three-phase process leading to a Palestinian state made sense, and was logical, and I think should be taken back up by both sides. And I'll talk about some changes that could be made to hopefully make that more viable. So let's look at it in more detail. Step one, there's three phases. So step one is ending terror and violence, normalizing Palestinian life, and building Palestinian institutions. So just stop all the violence. Let's go to a peaceful coexistence and build a viable set of Palestinian institutions, not run by a terrorist government, let's say. Maybe that would be a good idea, to not have a terrorist organization running the government. And basically trying to give a better quality of life to the Palestinian people. And then step two is the transition stage, where basically there is the creation of a Palestinian state once there are the raw building materials for a Palestinian state, and basically having provisional borders, attributes of sovereignty. So giving, based on step one of having the Palestinians stop launching missiles into Israel and being peaceful, the reward for that is more autonomy, and basically creating economic recovery and starting to give more economic freedom, and launching an establishment of permanent status agreements so that the states can form and operate independently and peacefully. And then lastly is a permanent status agreement, and ending the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And so if you can, first start, to create peace, second, start to build a viable Palestinian state, and then third, create normalized international relations between the two entities. To me, that sounded like a great plan. I'll talk about a little bit, the Palestinian refugee problem, though, was not fully dealt with there, I don't think, unless someone knows otherwise. I didn't read that it was, and that's a key situation. Next is the Annapolis Conference in 2007, basically relaunching the peace process. And while both sides agreed to negotiate, it didn't lead to a lasting agreement. Again, people just keep falling into these old patterns of violence. So who's right? Neither one is right, is my opinion. And yet they're both right in some respects. They both have reasons to be angry, but I'm going to talk about why reasons to be angry is not a reason to be violent. And the roadmap to peace failed because Palestine didn't prevent military action, and Israel at the time responded with the creation of settlements and conducting military operations in Palestinian territories. So again, escalating violence, just like happened this time, and although not as bad as this time, that last one. And then in the most recent conflict, hopefully we can agree Hamas was wrong to invade Israel. Israel was also wrong, in my opinion, to cause more deaths in Gaza on the counteroffensive. And so let's talk about an alternative approach rather than an eye for an eye, making everyone blind. So who's winning hearts and minds internationally? College campuses are, largely showing support for Palestinians. While Hamas did start the fight, Israel's response was so heavy-handed that they caused about 18 times as many deaths as the initial incursion into Israel. And And so, Palestinians also are much less economically successful. And, so if you take a poorer group of people and you kill more of them, then you're going to naturally win more hearts and minds on the side of the poorer group of people who are suffering higher civilian casualties. And so, the strong show of military force by Israel, to me, was actually detrimental to Israel's own goal. If Israel's goal is peace, which I think it is and should be, I'm going to give people the benefit of the doubt until it's, proven otherwise. I'm going to say that Israel, and I don't know if the current Israeli government's goal is peace, but I will say the Israelis I know do want peace in the Middle East. And as far as the people on the ground, the average citizens. So I want to talk a little bit about why, having compassion would actually be consistent, and forgiveness on, basically what I think would have been a better response for Israel would have been to not respond in a military fashion, but to say, look, we want, our captives back, and we want to, have peace and to win hearts and minds by being nonviolent in response to violence. I think Israel would have gotten all of the compassion and won a lot of hearts and minds by not responding militarily and having constraint. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why both Jewish and Muslim teachings really preach forgiveness. And so three key points in Judaism focusing on forgiveness. In the Talmud, it talks about who is strong, he who overcomes his inclinations. So the inclination to respond to violence with more violence and with greater violence. Responding with compassion and forgiveness is actually what is encouraged. In Proverbs, it says, do not say, I'll do to them as they have done to me. I'll pay them back for what they did. And so the Hebrew Bible, or Tanakh, specifically says not to do that, not to do exactly what the Israeli government did. Forgiveness in prayer. Forgiveness is a key theme in Jewish prayers, especially during the Day of Atonement. So I would argue that Judaism does preach forgiveness and should consider forgiveness. So Islam also focuses on forgiveness. Quranic verses, good and evil deeds are not alike. Repel evil with good, and he who is your enemy will become your dearest friend. I wish more people in the Israeli-Palestinian area would be thinking along those lines, repelling evil with good. And that's what I was basically proposing that I think Israel could have done. They had an opportunity to do. And a hadith, which is a saying of the Prophet Muhammad, was the strong person is not the one who is strong in wrestling, but the one who controls himself in anger. Well, I don't think the Israeli response was a controlled response, and I don't think that Hamas's initial incursion was a controlled response either. Although, if my friend's hypothesis is right, it might have been a controlled anger response, but that's not exactly a response of forgiveness, like this is calling out for. There's also an emphasis on mercy in Islam, and Allah, the Muslim word for God, is called the most merciful, and so the intent is for his followers to be merciful in his image. So that said, I would suggest that we all practice forgiveness rather than violence and anger. If you came to our events on karma and rebirth, you'll know that there's good evidence that human beings are reborn, and this is a little bit of FTI specific info for people who have come to past events. And I would argue that people who cause significant unnecessary harm should be stopped defensively by force, but not hunted down in mass along with their friends. And I would argue that everyone who does wrong suffers for their actions, probably in this life, but definitely after this life is over. And I have a pretty good logical argument for that I presented in our conversation on karma. And I would argue we're all better off being compassionate towards those who cause harm, not to put ourselves in harm's way, but to practice that virtue of forgiveness. And I like to say, everybody deserves love and compassion. Those that we think deserve it the least are the ones that need it the most. So a little bit of food for thought. So the keys to getting the Palestinians to agree is basically sovereignty and territory, dealing with the settlements, dealing with the security concerns, in terms of allowing Palestinians to have control over their own security. And so, those are what the Palestinians want. If we look at the Israelis, they really feel strongly that the Palestinian refugees, I think I may have I'm sorry, I reversed these. This is keys to getting the Israelis to agree, and proposals. Okay, I think I got those slides confused, but the Palestinians basically need to be proven, need to prove that they can be trusted with their own security and prove that they don't pose any significant threat to Israel. And that's why I think the three-phase solution was a good one, because it asked for ceasing violence as a first step, which makes sense to me. So a little bit of thoughts on how to end the war. I think peace or nonviolence is the only way to win a war. And if both sides practice it, both sides win. If one side practices it and the other doesn't, the side practicing nonviolence is the one that wins hearts and minds, and the aggressor will lose them. And so to me, I'd like to see Israel and Palestine both be 100% defensive. And if they both simply defend themselves and no one launches any offensive attacks, then international hearts and minds will basically then they'll build up trust with each other. But if one side does break that truce and attacks, and then there's no counterattack, international hearts and minds will go towards the one that was attacked and simply defending themselves. And so I think though that being 100% defensive could help both countries settle into a perspective of peace. And so lastly, I think for the refugees, we need a more modern system of training people to do the jobs needed for the economy. I think if refugees had, valuable skills, they would be welcomed into whatever country they wanted to go to. And so, that to me, along with cultural assimilation and, some sort of training that will help them culturally assimilate into the states that they're entering, would be helpful. And so that said, I would love to know in the comments if people learned anything, knowledge, wisdom, or both. Was this helpful? And we have a ton of hands up, so we're going to get to those. And thank you all for your time and attention. And Michael, you were the first hand up, and I do want to give before I let you go, please try to keep comments and questions to one point at a time, one comment or one question at a time. You can raise your hand as many times as you want, but we want to stick to one comment or question at a time and less than 2 to 3 minutes. Kay will be speaking up if you take more than 2 or 3 minutes, to ask you to finish your thought, and just try to finish up in the next 10 or 15 seconds if she does that. And she'll talk over if you go more than 2 or 3 minutes. So that said, Michael, did I forget anything?
No, you're good. So thanks. I'm just going to add a couple of facts that is not being advertised in the media. About a year ago, New York Times published an article that Israel has been funding Hamas. That was highly unusual. The week of October 8th, I follow the Israeli news for a number of reasons. They published an article stating the same facts, the same information again. In fact, it was such viable information that Fareed Zakaria, GPS 360, I suspect some people watch the Sunday shows, he reported it and questioned his guests. And then, so this is fairly well established. And then additionally, New York Times, again, last week published an article that Israel knew about the possibility of attack from Hamas, extensive attack from Hamas a year prior to October 7th. I don't know how much agreements, how much factual emphasis I would put on that, but these are reported. And just add one partial opinion on how I think about things anymore. As I've got older, I now I used to chess early on in when I was younger. I used to play chess, and I would try to move. I would try to see ahead 1 or 2 moves. Now I try to predict 6 or 7 moves ahead. It's far more difficult, but some of these facts, these data points that is highly anomalous that we hear could potentially be put on the chess moves and on the chessboard and be made sense out of. Just wanted to provide some additional facts that I knew.
Can you post a source for the Israel funding Hamas piece? Because when I put that into ChatGPT, it disagreed with that. So I would love to see some objective sources that say Israel is funding Hamas. That seems very odd to me. Like, it's theoretically possible. I'm not discounting that it's not possible. I want to be open-minded, but I would love for you to post an objective source, not
correct
biased
him
on
if
that.
you want. So I think it's more that they funded them at one point, maybe like early on in their existence, like in the 80s. I think that's what he meant.
Okay. Is that what you meant, Michael?
The article that was published a year ago by New York Times, I don't believe it stated that specifically. The article from one of the Israeli news agencies, trying to recall exactly what it said. New York Times, I can Google it and reference it. The Israel news agency, I can't recall exactly what it is, but maybe I can find it.
I already posted it in the chat. Pay attention. The link is already there.
There's a statement of Netanyahu from 2019 who speaks of bolstering Hamas. So this is long after the 1980s. Support for Hamas. That was before it was even had the name Hamas. And then we have the articles today on Israel allowing Qatari diplomats into Gaza, bringing approximately, I'm trying to remember the exact figure, $50 to $60 million a year into Gaza. And basically what Netanyahu said in 2019 is that Hamas was their ally because by having Hamas rule over Gaza, it would ensure that a Palestinian state would never be created. Okay, so this is a public statement by Netanyahu in 2019.
That's exactly correct.
Interesting. I had not heard that. If you can post that, it'd be great, Victor, if you didn't already. I can't follow all of the links in the chat. I'm trying to follow what I can, but that's very interesting that I hadn't heard. I did, by the way, I neglected to introduce the event. So if you guys don't mind, I'm going to take just 20 seconds to 30 seconds to say tonight's event was advertised to a lot of different meetup groups, but the organization that organizes tonight's event is called the Freethinker Institute. We're a not-for-profit looking to support and empower members. We cover a wide range of topics not typically covered in academia or industry, often a lot of political hotbed topics like tonight's. And so I will, I'm going to post some links for anyone that wants to learn more about the FTI. We also have a membership track for people that want to apply practical philosophy into their daily lives. And then the last thing I forgot to mention in the intro is that we want to remain polite. That's the only rule we have in the FTI, is that you have to remain polite. You can say anything you want, but let's keep the conversation polite so that we can all listen to each other with an open mind. Unfortunately, by the way, the New York Times article was paywalled, so I couldn't read it because I'm out of New York Times articles. So that said, Victor, did you cover what you wanted to say, or
no, I wanted
okay.
to address some of the issues in the context that I think are are incorrect. On the issue of ethnic cleansing, you said you hadn't even read about it. So the basic plan was called Plan Dalet, right? It's the D letter in the Hebrew alphabet. It was established. It was these are in the British archives, Haganah documents from the time of Mandatory Palestine. The planning, it was asked for by Ben Gurion in March of 1947, and the plan was finished in March of 1948. The ethnic cleansing began very, very slowly in December of 47, but really took off at the end of March. And so the notion that the Arab states invaded immediately, this is historically incorrect. They invaded in response to the ethnic cleansing by that point, May the 14th, May 15th, the inauguration of the state of Israel, 300,000 Palestinians had already been uprooted from their homes. So that is what you have to understand the context of the conflict. As far as 1967, the notion that the Arabs tried to invade, that is simply incorrect. It was a 6-day war because there was no Arab armies that were arrayed against Israel. The General's Son is a book by the son of an Israeli general who was in the Israeli general staff in 1967. And when the general staff took the measure of the Arab military position, they said that it would take the Arabs 18 months to mount a credible offense against Israel. So the way Sharon describes it, it was a war for water. It was a war for the headwaters of the Jordan River in the Golan Heights. That's why the Golan Heights were seized. And it was a war for the mountain aquifer on the West Bank and also the Jordan River. So that the notion that the Arabs attacked in 67, it's simply not so. Okay, so now we have the context
I'm so sorry, Victor. We need to move on to the next speaker. I'm sorry.
So, Kay, if you don't mind, he is kind of like giving good historical context. So, do you mind if I just let him go a little further?
This last point, I'll try to do it fast. The 2000 summit, with Clinton, right, between the Israelis and the Palestinians, there was no peace offer from Israel. It was an offer of less than a state, which is the language that Rabin himself, who was assassinated, used. Less than a state. It was an encircled state. It was not even a state. It was not an independent state. It was a political entity that Israel offered. This is why it was rejected. And Barak's foreign minister, Shlomo Ben Ami, said that if I had been a Palestinian at those talks, I would have rejected Israel's offer because it was not the offer of a state. There has never been the offer of a Palestinian state by Israel, and no Israeli prime minister has ever stopped the settlement building except for a very brief time, a matter of months. So this notion that there's no peace partner on the Palestinian side is utter nonsense. 73% of the Gazans on October 6th said they wanted peace with Israel and a two-state solution. Okay,
Thanks, Victor. Sorry, Victor. I definitely raised your hand again. I appreciate everything you said, and I appreciate the facts you're bringing to bear. But we do want to there's a ton of hands up, so I want to let other people go. So, George, go ahead.
Yeah, what I want to say is a lot of your presentation, and I don't fault you for this, is really just a lot of fantasy. Everything that we're told about Israeli history is essentially a lie. The Zionist project, and I want to start off by saying very quickly that first and foremost, Zionism has absolutely nothing to do with Judaism. It has nothing to do with Jews or being Jewish. Okay. Indeed, there are many Jews that are hostile and reject the Zionist project for very obvious reasons. The Zionist project really is a function of the 19th century, and the notion that somehow you need a nation state, right? But that's a very 19th century conception. And indeed, I mean, what I'll add is that the victims of Zionism, really well, there's two victims. There are the Palestinians. Then there are the Jews that were moved there. In other words, they were not given the option to reintegrate into their lives after World War II, and they were sent to Israel, really, really ghettoized. And so I, to be honest with you, I feel a lot of pity for the Israelis that live in Israel, because again, they are victims of Zionism almost as much as the Palestinians are. But that virtually everything you said, again, is simply untrue. I mean, you know, the Zionist project starts off with the lie, people without land. I mean, that's it. That says it all, right? And everything that follows afterwards. Oh, the Arabs rejected partition. They were about to attack in '67. The Palestinians don't want peace. These are all lies, one lie after another. I mean, and that's what Victor sort of points out. I mean, you know, it takes time to work through the lies and misrepresentation. I mean, the idea that the Israelis were ever interested, but first and foremost, '67 was an outright war. It was nothing but a land grab, right? Victor said it's a 6-day war. It really wasn't even a war. The Israeli military just went into Gaza and went into the West Bank. Why? Because they just wanted those territories. And then shortly after that is when we get the settler movements, you know, kicking people off the land. There was an excellent article in the New York Times. About the harassment of, I'm just going to finish this thought. There was an excellent article in the New York Times recently, just a few days ago, about the harassment, the horrific harassment that Palestinians suffer in the West Bank. So, you know, again, the idea that there's two sides to this, there are no sides. Even the Israelis that live there are victims of the Zionist project. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks. You know, we need Garrett to be able to move through this meeting, if you don't mind, please.
Yeah, I do want to let people finish thoughts, but guys, let's try to keep, you know, think about what you want to say ahead of time so that you can keep it to under 2 minutes. And just so we can have conversation. When you say that everything was a lie, I mean, like everything that I said, you know, I think you can say there's different sides to it, but I don't think you can say that they're outright lies. Like they're verifiable, you know, points. There are different perspectives, and I appreciate your sharing, you know, more nuance and more perspective. But I guess I'm, you know, more interested rather than the historical, to hear what people think about the go forward. Like, do people agree that there should be peace from both Israel and Palestine? And, you know, should we try to broker peace between these two sides and try to prevent the violence?
Could I just say one thing to you, Garrett? Just one thing to you. First and foremost, you know, Victor and I are somewhat of a disadvantage because we are trying to correct the historical record. And so, and I understand that we're running long because there is a lot to say. Secondly, I would respectfully submit to you that the facts that you listed, forgive me for saying this, you did not verify them. If you went and looked at anything you said, if you actually went to Wikipedia, to any standard historical source, academic source, they would tell you that a lot of what you said, if not all of what you said, in terms of the Israeli side, is just propaganda and lies. I'm telling you the facts.
George, those aren't facts. You're making up stuff. I mean, it's insane what you're doing.
An opinion, not facts.
Hang on, guys. Let's remain polite. So George is entitled to his opinion. We can all share our opinions here, and I would like people to share sources for their you know, for their you know, opinions. And you know, I did source from a variety of places, but including ChatGPT. And I know people don't like ChatGPT, but I'll tell you, it knows a lot more than you know, any one human being. And when I do fact check it, it's generally pretty accurate. So again, I think there are different perspectives, there are different nuances. So you know, I guess that said, I want to let Abe go. If you're the Abe that we is a regular, it's good to see Abe.
Garrett, I'm just reacting to these are statements of facts, and it's
Thank
really
you,
has to be
Daniel.
fact checked. That's what I'm reacting to.
Thank you, Daniel. And by the way, I don't mean to say that you can't respond. I did forget to say in the beginning, and thank you, Daniel, for pointing out. Like we do want people to be able to respond to each other. It shouldn't just be me talking with the people who raise their hands. Like if someone, when you know, who raises their hand is speaking up and you want to respond to them, you can ask, like less than 20 or 30 seconds of, clarifying questions to sort of, if they maybe have a, like in Daniel's case, he might say, well, George, where are you getting your facts from? And can you post a link to the Wikipedia article that shows what Garrett said is not true? That's a sort of thoughtful way of, putting it on George to prove what he's saying, that what I said isn't true, without just telling him that he's wrong. Like, I prefer not to tell people that they're wrong. I don't mind George told me that he thinks that I'm wrong. That's like, he can do that, but I generally recommend asking questions to sort of uncover the truth and ask people to justify their perspectives rather than to say other people are wrong, because none of us is the sole arbiter of objective truth. That said, Abe, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I'm looking at it from a solutions perspective.
Me too. Good, Abe.
I look at this and think, I think we in the US have to stop giving aid to Israel. In fact, I think, we should be supporting Palestine and giving aid to them so that they get on par with Israel. And I think it will solve most of the things. Here we take sides and we give this 14 billion to them, and they don't even seem to be grateful for what we are doing. I think most of the solution would be stop giving aid to them. Get Palestine up and running, to be an equal par with them. This way it would help the Palestinian people, it would give them jobs, it would prevent all this silly, idiotic wars which is going on. And that's all I have to say.
So I hear you, Abe, but I guess the only concern I have with that, I sort of agree with you in spirit, but the only concern I have with it is would the Palestinians just use that to bolster military attacks on Israel? I'd really like to see the first step be, non-aggression from both sides, even if it's for, like 6 months or, something like that, where, or a show of, like lack of military interest from both sides. And if both sides show non-aggression for a period of time, then I agree with you. I think we should bolster the Palestinian economy and show more carrot rather than stick, and say, look, if you continue to be nonviolent, your economy is going to continue to get better, and internationally we'll support you and help you grow and prosper. So I agree with you in spirit, but I think that there need to be conditions for it, because you don't want to bolster attacks on Israel specifically. Does that make sense, Abe?
Yeah, but they've got the whole Middle East there, because even they've got their self-interest. They're not going to accept, Palestinians coming up with this terrorism nonsense. Like, they're going to be a check on them. But what are we giving all this money to them, and this 14 billion, and giving all this war machinery to Israel? They can support themselves. We don't need.
I am curious if anyone can explain why we send so much military aid to Israel.
Well, because Israel is the only democracy that in the Middle East, and they're supporting the same value of United States.
Who was laughing? Hold on, please don't interrupt. Please don't interrupt people. That is rude. We said that the rule is to be polite. So listen with an open mind to understand Moshe's perspective.
Right. So I'm the Israeli guy, and I'm voicing my opinion. I think I don't know if I should just answer your question or I should talk my piece about what you said.
Just answer my question for now. Your hand is up, and we'll definitely get you to speak your perspective. I just wanted to ask that question from someone that could explain it.
This is the reason that Israel is the only democracy there, and they're supporting the same value of United States, and they've been allies all those years. That's it.
You can't be a democracy if you rule. You cannot be a democracy if you rule over 5.5 million Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. You cannot be a democracy that has the rule of law if your Supreme Court allows settlers to seize land, allows the entire Israeli state to seize 61% of the West Bank, to uproot so far
Guys,
800,000 Palestinians.
Victor, please
Right.
wait until
cannot be a democracy.
Victor, wait until your hand comes up. Like, you can say a quick response to something, but just like less than 20 seconds.
Can I make
And
a quick
I
comment?
will less than 20 seconds.
Okay, sure. So yeah, I mean, first of all, in the 20th century, there's actually a lot of evidence of the United States going against democracies in like South
Exactly.
America, Latin America,
Right.
and Iran. So I don't think that's actually why they
Exactly.
support Israel. You earlier you did question whether Israeli lobby is powerful in the United States. I know someone mentioned that quote from Trump. There's in 1997 in Fortune magazine, they asked people in Congress who they would rank as the top lobbies in the United States, and actually second was AIPAC, which is the Israeli
Let's not
lobby.
get into that. Let's not get into that. That's going to be a distraction. Let me say this, Garrett, very quickly. First and foremost, the United States used to give a lot more aid to Iran, and when they installed the Shah. I'm glad someone mentioned Iran. So it's the same thing for Israel. These are cat's paws. These are military cat's paws in a prime region of the world. That's what all this aid is about. Just like it was for Iran. It's about hegemony. It's about military power, and that's all it is.
Garrett, can I make
colonialism. Thank you. I do want to get to the hands up. So if we could,
Can I make a quick comment?
Very quick. We have a ton of hands up, so I just want to.
I understand. Just a quick comment.
Next question.
I'm
Go ahead.
very interested to hear Moshe's opinion. I think we all have our own opinions and angles. It's very rare. I have a lot of Jewish friends. They're highly educated in the U.S., and they may have some knowledge of what's going on, but I would be very interested to hear Moshe's opinion about what's going on and why. More the whys rather than the details of what's going on.
Yeah, I don't want to go back and forth, but I do appreciate him sharing his perspective, and we'll definitely get to his hand up. For next, I want to. I think Kevin was the next person.
No. I think it was me.
Correct.
Hold on one second. In the other room, but let me come back into the.
Bang. It was me, Garrett. Me.
Okay. Your hand may have gone down because of your speaking. But please, everyone, just pay attention when you speak. If you're on mute and you speak, it may take your hand down, and it'll give you a warning saying it's going to take your hand down. But go ahead, Will, and then we'll go to Kevin afterwards.
Garrett, can I just say one thing about procedure? To stop the meeting from kind of jumping all over the place, I would suggest to actually talk about a topic or a comment, and then ask for people to raise their hands about that. Because at the moment, you've got hands up for all different sorts of comments. Just a suggestion.
Bloody Australians.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, my suggestion was that I'm actually making the observation that people have got their hands up for all different, potentially lots of different themes or comments. Whereas it'd be better to actually, for example, you just asked for a comment about why the USA is funding Israel. So it would be an idea to say, well, people who want to comment on that issue, please put up your hand now, and I'll know.
Yeah, it's going to be over, like, trust me, we do this every week and it works well. The way we do it is each person who has their hand up introduces a new topic. If someone wants to respond to that topic, they can have less than 20 or 30 seconds to respond on that same topic. And each person with the hand is a new topic. So, Will, go ahead.
Thanks, Garrett. Bang, bang, Maxwell Silverhammer came down on his head. Oh, sorry. Got that song in my head. I'm thinking of Eric Weinstein, one of the former intellectual dark web members with Sam Harris. He was having a discussion with him recently about this. And he said something I thought was very interesting, and sort of in regards to what Abe said about trying to find a solution instead of picking a side. This is one of the biggest takeaways from this whole tragedy to me, is how we just pick a side. It seems to be in our human nature. We just pick a side and fight for our side. This is part of what gets us in the problem, in the situation in the first place. We're so sort of combative and warlike when we've been, or we perceive to have been wronged, we will attack instead of looking for solutions. Not everyone, but I'd say the overwhelming majority, they want revenge. And even in this, the atrocities committed by Hamas and atrocities committed by Israel, no doubt about it. What Eric Weinstein said is Hamas are doing, Israel are doing exactly what Hamas wanted. They're just saying thank you, because all the leaders aren't even in Gaza. They're away in Iran and all through the Middle East. And the people fighting are just pawns in the game. And so are the Palestinian people. That's another great atrocity. And meanwhile, the leaders of Hamas are rubbing their hands in delight because it's like a chess game, and Israel has done exactly what they wanted. They're creating fire. And as Bane said in The Dark Knight Rises, the fire rises, my friend, the fire rises. And that's what they want. They want the hatred. Now, for every Palestinian that gets killed, there's going to be 20 more jihadists created in years to come. So Israel, the best thing they can do, as Eric Weinstein, the Jewish intellectual, said, is hit them with as much love and kindness and benevolence as possible, the Palestinian people, and disarm Hamas that way. But at the moment, this is just exactly what Hamas wanted.
Yeah, that's exactly what my friend said, Will, that I was alluding to. And actually, you're reminding me of another essay that I wrote on how to combat terrorism, which I think we'll do another event on. And I agree with you, Will. I agree with everything you said. I think, and that's exactly why I was saying that I think forgiveness is what we should be focusing on, and compassion, and, focusing on support and help and collaboration, rather than, returning violence with more violence. So, I do think that people have a natural tendency to want to get revenge. But I would argue getting revenge never solves the problem. It just escalates the situation, which is exactly what you said. Every terrorist you kill, they're gonna recruit 20 more jihadists, and you end up with a never-ending war.
But Israel wants a never-ending war. They are colonialists.
It's not just Israel.
Well, I don't think that the population of any country wants a never-ending war. Do you think that the Israeli government wants a never-ending war, or that the Israeli citizens want a never-ending war? Because I'll tell you, I know a lot of Israeli citizens, and none of them want a never-ending war.
It's the same way that Europeans wanted peace when they were colonizing Native Americans.
This war is Netanyahu's war. This war, again,
Can we please go into the order, guys?
Yeah, let's go into order, guys. Kevin was the next with his hand up. You guys both have your hands up. We will get to you. And Ben, your hand went down because you got the message that I was alluding to earlier. So thanks for putting it back up again. Kevin, go ahead.
Okay, I mean, there's a ton I could put on the table, but of course, I trimmed it a lot. Speaking of one-sidedness, like I said, I've always been interested in media presentation, narrative. Are they telling the truth? Are they lying by omission, so on and so forth? So I just want to jump into some things in these last few months. So what was a day or two after October 7, Biden came out and mentioned had a big press conference and the 40 beheaded babies, which I'm sure everyone here has heard about. That was retracted. I don't know how many days later. Okay. But again, the retraction was very quiet, kind of like, a 9th page, bottom of the page sort of retraction. But you have to understand what effect that has. When he puts that out there, this is the president of the US.
What did he say? I'm sorry, I missed that.
He said that Hamas beheaded 40 Israeli babies, on October 7th. This is a full podium presentation. This is a big claim. The very second I heard it, I was super suspicious. And anyways, whatever, it was very quietly retracted. There was no big neon sign for the retraction. Okay, now ask yourselves if, when he said he saw pictures. Now, I know the difference between 40 beheaded babies and, say, a chocolate Easter bunny. You don't mix them up. You either see it or you don't. How does someone make the claim? In other words, I want to point, and you notice that the way the coin flips, it always flips to Israel's favor in all US mainstream media and government presentations. Always, okay? Fast forward to John Kirby. He's the spokesman, like the national, whatever, security spokesman. I'm sure many of you have seen him, kind of like a White House spokesman guy. When he was asked about Ukrainian casualties, oh yes, Putin is a war criminal, so on and so forth, should be tried in The Hague, so on and so forth. When asked about Israeli casualties on one day, he did, you could YouTube this, he did call it a fake cry, like an acting cry. I can't do it. I'm not going to try to imitate it. You could watch it on YouTube very easily. And the most, impassioned plea, so to speak, and they're our friends and our neighbors and our brothers. When asked later about Palestinian casualties, not that day, whatever, how many days or a week later, the answer was, well, this is war, civilians are going to die. That's what it is. And there was also a framing in there, not only to justify Israel's killing up to that point, but also to justify its future coming killing. And it's shocking to me how maybe few people point this out. And this is not just these last 3 months. This is years and decades I've been following this. I don't have the time, of course, here to present it all, but I do have the information. I could easily back it up.
Yeah, I mean, I do see major news outlets like NBC and Al Jazeera talking about how he clarified his response around that. So, I don't know why he would. I don't know if you have a hypothesis, Kevin. Why would he say it if he didn't think it? And I agree with you. It's a little hard to confuse, pictures of 40 beheaded babies and what are not pictures of 40 beheaded babies. Why do you think he would have said that?
It's not a missay. It'd be a hell of a long answer, to be honest. But I would look into the Israel lobbies, who, by the way, plenty of other people call out their owning of Congress, and for many years now, and including Miss Alice Rothschild herself in an interview with Miko Peled. You could look that up on YouTube. And this is not some bold claim. This is a claim like chewing bubblegum, sort of everybody knows. Didn't you know? Kind of a claim. But I would look into the lobbies and look into media narrative. Now that's a deep dive and it's going to take time. I can't do it in 2 minutes. I just can't.
Could I make a quick comment?
Yeah, if you have a clarifying question or you want to make a quick comment, less than 20 or 30 seconds.
Yeah, I try to keep it short, and I have a difficult time. I don't have the succinct in English language, succinctcy, what if that's the word. But anyways, a crazy hypothesis.
Yeah.
Look into pivot to the east statement of Obama and what it really means. This is a very long statement. I mean, explanation would be extensive, and it comes across, this is 6 or 7 moves away. But I don't believe US wants democracy in the Middle East, number one. Number two, we're pulling out. Number three, we need a force there to keep Iranians in check. Iran has 80 million population, highly innovative, very dangerous. 4, Russia needs to be occupied, and we gave them the green light. Look at the president's statement when he specifically was asked, will we directly get involved if Putin attacks the neighboring country? These are all factual statements. Like, the world isn't this black and white.
Thank you, Michael. So Jameson, you had your hand up next.
Yeah, wow, great comments. And I guess, whether it's the critique of some of the claims in your presentation, like we kind of tried to point out in the New York Times, it was behind a paywall for you. There's plenty, I even pulled it up on my phone, that, it's easy to dispel that. Number one, a nation's leader openly stated in the press that their objective was, even a one-state solution. We know that's been a stated fact from the leadership amongst that group. So just whether or not I don't know if we're not being intellectually disingenuous, genuine to have a presentation and say, the asserted goal is for, some peace, and this two-state solution here seems to be the alternative when, historically from its inception up until date, everything we can demonstrate historically, we'd have to go article after article, tactilely under every instance where no, that's contrary to, if you were to measure it objectively where we're at now, that wouldn't be the action or response of someone who had the interest objectively by anybody's standards that they wanted peace. So if you're here now and we're in a scenario where we're trying to discuss what the solution is, and like someone like you says, well, we just need peace and we need compassion and we love and understanding or whatever, and this and that. And then you ask a question like, well, why is Israel in that situation? Well, we can go back to the Crusades, and like someone had mentioned before, it is about strategic positioning and resources and other facts. Now it's about like historical context and the fact that those people were told they could have that spot. And then if you wanted to get more factual in history, and that particular group fascinates me because, there was a period in time that's been grayed out with what I would argue is the same tactics used today to kind of obfuscate, what happened in that period of time? Why in the 1930s were there these, Zionist movements that were caught on in media and in print? We know there was this colonistic.
Try to finish your thoughts, Jameson.
Right. So we know that stuff occurs. Why do we know that different groups, different nations made active efforts to work in certain ways to counter efforts and consolidate people's exhibiting the same traits? And now they end up in a certain location. And are we being intellectually disingenuous by not putting all the factors that led up to this moment with those people being in that spot versus just talking about, Papa said this.
Jameson,
That's where I'm at. That's what I'm asking. That's the solution, is to understand the past.
Jameson, it sounds like you're saying that you don't think a two-state solution and you don't think peace are the solution. Is that what you're saying?
Well, we know it's not from Israel's stated intent. The solution is for both of them to live together. That would be the only.
That's exactly what I proposed, but you seem to be disagreeing with me.
No, I'm not. I'm under the presentation that there's any option of a two-state solution from Israel is, that's disingenuous. They don't want that. We know it. They've already gerrymandered the population and structured the state in such a way that that's not even possible for a future endeavor. So, even when we're being disingenuous about discussing the origins of a Hamas attack.
I think what you're saying is that you don't believe that Israel has ever offered a genuine two-state solution. Do you think that the Arab solution was a genuine solution to a two-state solution?
Well, you'd have to no, because the Arabs never had a state. They never if you recall what the PLO and the Hamas and all of those, as someone discussed before, you needed an other. Psychologically, that group needed an other to achieve what has been accomplished today, and it's almost complete.
I would encourage you, like maybe during the session, if you're able to, do a little research in the Arab Peace Initiative and the roadmap for peace, and see whether or not you think that there were two-state solutions offered by both the Arab nations and Israel, because I think there were. And so I don't think it's fair to say that there weren't two-state solutions offered. You may think that from your perspective, none of the Israeli offers were genuine, but there were offers from both sides for two-state solutions. And I think that they both do ultimately want them. They're just, disagreeing over the logistics rather than that either side doesn't really want to have peace. I don't think, I do think that sometimes the leadership may not want peace because they use war to divide people, and they use war to control people, and they use fear to control people. But I don't think that the populations of Palestine and Israel really want war. And if anyone wants to make the argument that the Palestinian people and the Israeli people want war, I would love to hear that. Just raise your hand, and I would love to hear a perspective that tries to advocate for that. Howard, when your hand comes up, I'd love to hear it. I don't think personally that at least I know Palestinians and Israelis, and I don't think any of them really want want continuous warfare. They would prefer peace. They may want war because they feel like it's justified right now, but they ultimately would rather live in peace than war. That said, I'm going to let David go next. His hand's up next.
Guess he's went away.
David Galloway?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, I actually have.
You're breaking up pretty badly, David. If it doesn't get fixed quickly, we're going to go to Moshe.
David, we'll skip over you.
Yeah, go ahead,
Because
Moshe.
of the beliefs. Can you hear me?
Now I can, David. We're going to give you one more try, but your internet seems intermittent.
Okay, I'm so sorry about that. I was just going to say that I get very afraid when I hear some of the rhetoric about Hamas that I hear. We need to destroy them because of their beliefs. They are a group of people who are dangerous. It's very reminiscent to me of what I heard about the Muslim and Islam people growing up, that because their beliefs are dangerous, they are a group of people who must be destroyed, can't be trusted, etc., etc. And I really wonder who's the person who gets to say what is and is not a terrorist group? You see what I'm saying? I just get afraid when I hear some of the rhetoric around them that I hear. That's it.
Well, David, a lot of different countries get to say what constitutes a terrorist group. Now, mind you, I don't always agree with them, and I don't think that the way to combat terrorism is by killing all the terrorists, quite frankly. Like, I know that sounds a little bit weird, but I will have another event where we talk about combating terrorism, and I'll argue for a different approach, which is what I think it was Will said, which is, win the hearts and minds of the people. And ultimately, I don't think that we should kill all the Hamas leaders. We should convert all the Hamas leaders to no longer be terrorists, so that they are no longer a terrorist organization. I think that would be a better solution rather than just killing them all. Because when you kill them, they were, again, new leaders rise up. It doesn't end the terrorism. So I'm not a believer that you fight terrorism, with trying to kill all the terrorists. I don't think that wins the day. At least the war on terror has been going on pretty much my whole life, and we haven't conquered all the terrorists. In fact, we lost in Afghanistan. So the war on terror doesn't seem to be a winning war, just like the war on drugs wasn't a winning war. Finally, drugs are starting to become legalized, which we had another event on why I think we should legalize drugs, even though I don't do drugs. But that said, I want to let Moshe go. Thank you, David, for your comments. And I agree with you that, David, that we shouldn't be vilifying people. I think it's okay to acknowledge that Hamas right now are terrorists. That doesn't mean we should hate them or kill them all. I think we should try to convert them to not be terrorists. But Moshe, go ahead.
So I heard what Victor said and other people, and for quite a while, I think that it's kind of sad that everybody has his own narrative and everybody thinks that he's right and the other person is wrong. And for every argument that one side is going to give, the other side is going to have a different argument. And people think that they know the fact, however, they're reading sources from wherever sources they read, that I'm sure There are many other sources that will show you the other side. So I do think that, to me, it's useless and fruitless to go back to history to figure out what, happened like 7,000 years ago, 70, 100 years ago, because this, frankly, will get you nowhere. And the point is, the fact is, there are 8 million Israeli in Israel. There is 2 million people in Gaza, few million people in Jeddah, in Somalia, and the other places. And the question is, how do you get peace? Who cares what happened in 48? Nothing is going to change. 48 is 48. It happened. It's past. And you can go there and you can cry and you can do whatever you want to do. These will not change the future. It will just keep you where you are at, angry, hateful, and sorrowful, because it won't change.
That's what I was going to
And I
say.
think-
It'll get you, Moshe, is thinking about all of the injustice in history will get you angry and vengeful. I mean, it will get you there, but is that really the future we
It
want
will
for
not get you
ourselves?
there. I'm not sure what there is. Where do you want to go? I mean,
Yeah,
clearly,
exactly.
if you're going to go and say all these things, Victor, what do you want to take all the 8 million people in Israel and throw them out to the sea? I mean, what's the point?
No,
And the other thing is, I think the other problems that we have, in my mind, is that here in the West, people think in a Western mind. The Middle East is not Western. They don't think the way the Americans think. And this is some of the reason why United States went to change the balance in the Middle East with Iraq, because they thought they're going to bring democracy and whatever it is. And this is really the issues that people coming from
Is
other
racism going to be
side.
allowed? Is racism going to be allowed? Because he's talking about a whole people and the way they think, because that's outright racism.
Excuse
What?
me, George.
He didn't imply it.
I don't hear anything
inferiority.
that he's saying as sounding at all racist. He's
I
saying
didn't say racist, I said Western mind, the way you think. I mean,
Again,
you're an
that's
American.
that's racist reasoning. Oh, they can't be as democratic. Again, that mode of thought is outright and pure racism.
He might not have
Arabs are saying they
mentioned
can't participate in democracy.
Listen, what I meant, you have your own culture. You have the way you think. Other people in different culture thinks differently. So if you think you can come with your culture and teach other people how to live, you're wrong. Everybody has to select the ways they want to live in their own culture. That's what I'm saying.
Well,
You're
Moshe, wouldn't you agree that across different cultures we can teach knowledge and wisdom to each other?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
but
all
not,
I would say is that rather than making it a, you Westerners don't understand us in the Middle East, let's say, I agree with you in the beginning, like, let's look for a path forward and look for a path towards peace. But
I
let's
know,
not
but
say
still
that.
you have, but still you do have to think that every culture has its own certain thinking. You should come first and think about it. In a sense, you need first to go and understand them.
Yes.
And understand where they're coming from in order to even bring your thought to it. Of course, you can mix culture, you can mix all those things, but to come, for example, we was forced to Iraq to basically bring democracy there. Right?
It was the United States that overthrew the Iranian democracy.
George,
okay? I don't want to be the truthful.
George, relax.
Why are you so angry, George?
George, you're getting emotionally.
I'm angry because you're lying and vilifying entire people.
George,
who's
relax.
vilifying?
Garrett, can I just break in for a second? I don't know how to put up the golden hand for some reason. I've been trying to do it.
Reactions, Susan. Under reactions, there will be a raise hand button.
Reactions?
Yeah, reactions.
Where is that?
At the bottom of the screen.
You gotta hit more first. You see the more 3 dots?
Yeah, you may have to hit the 3 dots more on your screen.
And on the bottom, it should say reaction.
I do not see it. Well, rather than taking up your time for that, just consider me as having my hand up when you think it appropriate. I just want to make a comment that everybody, I think, is overlooked to some degree.
Okay,
so
what I'm going to do is...
My hand is up.
And I have just one last thing that I want to say about this issue. And as I said, and one of the Hamas charters is basically the destruction of Israel. And the question really, how do you make peace with a group like this?
And I do think that Israel did brought money to Hamas and brought Gazan into basically to work in Israel. And the idea was that if that Hamas wants to manage the people, and if you're going to give them economic prosperity, maybe the situation is going to change. And apparently, the way Israel think around is they were wrong, that Hamas basically in the past 2 years were preparing to what they did right now. And they did what they planned to do, and that's it.
Could I ask a quick question from Moshe, since he's calling from Israel?
Yeah.
Is Israel a religious country? Just like you would look at Iran, you would call it a Islamic country. Is Israel a religious country?
It's really depend. No, Israel is not a religious country from the same concept of Iran, because in Iran, the law, all the law is Islamic law. Israel has Jewish state, and some Jews are Orthodox Jews, which means they are very religious, and some Jews are secular Jews.
Majority of the population.
Excuse me?
Majority of the population, are they religious?
No, the majority, only 20%, or even less than this, maybe 50% of the population are Orthodox. But there is all levels. There is from all, like in the Islam, there is from the Sufi all the way to the people that just practicing, just praying 5 days a week, 5 times a day. So it's all the spectrums. There is from secular, agnostic, atheist to fully religious.
So 73.6% of the Israeli population identifies as religiously Jewish. So
yeah, but there's a difference about the religions. You can be Jewish, but you can be not fully Orthodox. There is like the Orthodox, and there is the spectrum.
Correct, but I think it's I think that my statement in the presentation is accurate, Moshe, that the majority of Jews and voting people in Israel now are religiously inclined, like as opposed to secular Jews from the earlier days of Israel's history.
I'm not
sure. Susan's trying to say something for quite some time down there.
Yeah, I was going to have Susan go after. Well, let's have Susan go after Moshe. So, because she didn't know how to raise her hand, I'm sure she would have been up earlier.
So yeah, on a macro level, I clearly think that we should really spend more effort and more emotion in trying to figure out how to solve this issue, rather to find what is the source of the conflict and who owned this square of land and what was in the Abraham date and so on. That's my feeling, because
I agree with you.
I think it's just a waste of time.
I agree with you, and I would love to encourage everyone, for those that have their hands up, to try to think about, what do you see as the path forward? I want to encourage everyone to think about, what is the path forward? What's the solution? And Susan,
okay, I already put in the chat what the solution is. Do you want me to tell you?
Richard, you can raise your hand if you want to share it. Or Jacob, sorry, you can raise your hand if you want to share it. Susan, go ahead. You're on mute, though. You're on mute, Susan. Susan, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Gotcha. I thought when I talked to you, I left it on mute. We're dealing with two countries, both of whom are two groups, both of whom want the whole country. One factor that I think people have ignored is that since Jews have been persecuted for so long, I'm Jewish, but I've never had a problem. But I have family members who were in the Holocaust, who were thrown out of Poland because they were Jewish. I had another cousin whose whole family was demolished. These people are very afraid that they don't have any security in the world. And to them, there's only one place in the world where they know they can go. I don't feel this way, but I know a number of people who do. Whereas other people feel that the Palestinians, although they are Palestinians, they have other Muslims around them who will stand up for them. The Jews, the ones who are afraid, feel no one will stand up for them or support them, and there could be another Holocaust. I know people who, unfortunately, from my point of view, vote specifically according to what they think will support Jews if the time comes. And this is an issue, this fear, this insecurity is very different on the Jewish side than on the Palestinian side, I think, because there are other Muslims and they are not persecuted through the 7,000 years or whatever it's been as the Jews feel they have. Okay, and that has to be considered and has to be dealt with.
Can I comment on that?
Yes, 20, less than 20 seconds, please.
Yeah, I'll beg to differ in terms that the Palestinians feel secured from other Muslim countries. What
That may
Muslim,
be-
what, let me finish my, just 20 seconds. What Arab country has opened their doors to Palestinians? So whether Palestinians feel, no, they rally for them at the UN, they rally for them in the newspaper, but what have they done to lift their finger to help their fellow Palestinians?
Jordan, yeah.
Jordan is a more complicated case, but you
It
know,
is, absolutely, I agree.
so let's leave that aside.
Actually, Jordan helped, hasn't done much, if anything.
A small
Yeah.
country, limited resources. Quick question for
They
Susan.
kicked out Arafat and the Palestinians at one time.
So
I'm just
guys, I would like to ask
Palestinians.
a question
Quick
of
comment?
Susan. Susan, you said that both groups want the whole country. I'm curious why you think that when all the solutions put forth by both Arabs and Jews have proposed a two-state solution.
I think that the Jews, given what's been going on since 1948, clearly would like to have more land. And from what I understand, the Palestinians, not the Palestinian public, but the leaders have said essentially, you know, from the river to the ocean, we're going to push the Jews out. I have heard that. I've heard it from a number of people. They both want, and the Palestinians have not, or the leaders, I leave it to the leaders. I don't think the common people, I don't want to speak, you know, for them. I think there is this sense that they have not been willing to recognize a Jewish state. I don't know that the Jews are really willing to recognize a Palestinian state either. I can't speak for that, but I think it sounds to me like there's overlapping. They both want most of the territory. They're not very happy.
I would look back at the proposals that have been made historically and see whether or not that's accurate, because I don't believe that it is. So I think I would recommend, just for your knowledge, to go back and look at the historical solutions put forth by both sides and what the borders would have looked like. I don't think there's a
clearly
big...
Israel does not want to have anything to do with Gaza. Gaza was belonged actually to Egypt, and Egypt did not want to take it when the peace treaty with Egypt occurred.
Yeah.
So, so that said, I want to go to Sufi, who had his hand up next. Did anyone else want to comment on Susan before we go on to Sufi?
Yes, I didn't get to make my comment.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Two
Michael.
quick questions. One for Susan, one for Moshe. Do you believe that this was an overreaction, a mistake in the part of Israel state responding the way they did to the region with their and do you think it was an honest mistake? Let me repeat that. An honest mistake rather than a calculated move.
I think they shot themselves in the foot. And that was said a long time ago by, I wish I could remember his name, in the New York Times, maybe about 3 weeks ago. There was one person, one of the op-ed members, who I believe is Jewish, who said the best recommendation he had ever heard, and he did cite somebody who said it, said, don't do anything, let yourself be the sufferer, and you will win in the end, because yes, they overact, and they're making more Hamas people as we speak by what they're doing.
Oh, I guarantee Hamas has done a lot of recruiting in the last month or two. Guarantee it.
Well, my opinion is what we don't actually know. I think in the Middle East, if you are a lamb, you're beaten, eaten. So Israel until now thought that people are afraid to basically engage, and they lost their edge. And I don't know if it was wrong in the long term. If they will be able to dismantle Hamas weapon, I think Fatah is going to get in, and they are going to take care of Hamas, or the Palestinians themselves going to take care of Hamas. Because I'm not quite sure that Hamas in Gaza was good for the Palestinian, but I guess it's the Palestinian to say. So I don't know. On one hand, it was a reaction of a wounded lion that basically you came and you killed its cub, and you just say, that's it, fuck it, I don't care anymore. And they were hiding.
Can we move on?
George, please.
Thank you,
Don't
Moshe.
interrupt. Please don't interrupt people. If someone is speaking, let them finish speaking. If someone needs to be cut off for too much time, I'll be the one to cut them off.
So
Either me or one of the time checkers. Sorry,
I can't
Moshe.
say that if it was the best move that Israel can do, or it's the worst move. Time will tell. I really don't know.
Moshe, all I can say is that if America couldn't disarm the Taliban in Afghanistan, it's unlikely that Israel is going to disarm Hamas in Gaza. So
Yeah,
I
but
hate
it's
to
not
say
in
it,
the
but I don't think
backyard.
this is going to be the end of Hamas. It's going to
I
be the
know,
beginning of a
I'm
stronger
sure.
Hamas.
Yeah, but I'm sure that if the Taliban was in Virginia, it would be different.
You know, like little bit hard to take that in context. So that said, I'm gonna let Sufi go next. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to something Susan said. She didn't maybe say this directly, but I feel like there's an implication that Palestinians could just leave the land for the Israelis. Maybe she didn't mean it in that way,
No,
but that is
I did not. I did not.
okay.
I
But
just said there's a fear, and that both groups or territory because they both lived there over time.
Yeah. Well, I do want to say that you know, people usually say, "Oh, they're Palestinians are Arabs. Why don't they just go to the other Muslim or Arab countries?" But actually, DNA tests have proven that Palestinian DNA actually resembles a lot of Jewish DNA. So their ancestors did live there. Even I took a DNA test and I put it on a website that shows you who it resembles, and actually a lot of it came up as Jewish and Palestinian. So I think that's like a misconception that they could just go to the Arab countries or the Muslim countries, but really their ancestors did live there for centuries. And even the first prime minister of Israel, I have a quote from him. He said, if I were the leader of the Palestinians, I wouldn't sign an agreement with Israel. We have taken their country. We have come and stolen their country. Why would they accept that? Another thing he said, politically, we are the aggressors and they defend themselves. Right? That was the first leader of Israel. So from his perspective, he certainly saw it as, you know, an occupation, an aggression, or stealing their land. But typically, from the Zionist argument, you won't hear those terms. You know, they'll usually say like they're the victim. You know, they will never admit that it's an occupation. Yeah, that's about it.
Thank you, Sufi, for your comments. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Did you have more you wanted to say?
Oh, I did want to write that there is something called the right of return, which Jewish people, when Israel conquered it in 1948, they allowed any Jews around the world to come live and get citizenship. But any Palestinians that were exiled in 1948, which is, I think, about 1 million of them, they didn't give them the right to return. So there's this common idea that, the Arabs that are citizens of Israel right now, they have equal rights to Jewish Israelis, but that's one aspect of it that's definitely not equal, which is the right to return. You know, so I have, for example, if you were a Jew living in New York, I'm assuming you probably could get Israeli citizenship quite easily, and they'll even steal a Palestinian's home and give it to you. I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but I'm saying we have seen examples of that.
That's
very Palestinians, true. We don't have that. You know, I can't go get it. I actually tried to apply for Israeli citizenship, but I wasn't eligible. So yeah,
it's very true. It's very discriminatory. It's
Yeah.
automatic. If you're Jewish, you have an automatic right to be a citizen in Israel. And what you say is true about taking over homes. I went to school with a guy called Daniel Luria, who's been on TV. His mission over there is actually to
keep it short, Howard, because we're out of turn. But go ahead.
But you said we should speak up if we had something to say about a
yeah,
point.
but less than 20 or 30 seconds if it's a response to someone who had their hand up.
If you use up my 20 seconds, that's fine.
I'm just gonna drop.
It's okay. I'm not trying to give you a hard time. I just want you to keep it short because we have a lot of hands up.
I'm gonna put some sources for what I said. And another thing I did want to reiterate earlier where I was cut off. I did in 1997, Fortune magazine asked people of Congress to rank the most powerful lobbies, and second was actually AIPAC, the Israeli lobby. I just wanted to throw that in. I know you mentioned that earlier, that you were questioning whether Trump's claim that Israeli owned Congress. Maybe they don't own Congress, but they were certainly considered powerful before the war on terror, right? 1997.
I'm not claiming that it's a weak lobby. Trust me, I'm not claiming that.
Okay.
To say that they own Congress is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's an exaggeration.
Like, it's laughable. Yeah. It's an extreme exaggeration.
Yeah,
it is a very powerful lobby. Otherwise, Israel wouldn't have such staunch support by both Republicans and Democrats, and huge military and financial support from the U.S. So it's clearly got a very powerful lobby. But to say that they own Congress is ridiculous. Yeah. So, and I'm just saying that the credibility from Trump is not, to be expected. So
the question is whether they own Congress in relation to Israel and more broadly in other countries in the Middle East. I think that's a fair comment.
Quick comment.
Yep.
Does anyone know the GDP of Israel? Compare in their ranking among the largest GDPs.
It's about $58,000 a year is the nominal GDP per capita, which is 14 times that of the Palestinian population on the West Bank and Gaza combined. Within Israel, the Israeli Jews have a per capita income that is 3 times that of the Israeli Arabs. Okay, and so it's an unequal. It was an unequal society to begin with, even before 67, and this is the basis, according to Bet Salem, the Israeli human rights group. It's the basis of the apartheid, because the Israeli Arabs lived under military rule until 67. Then the military rule was transferred to the West Bank.
I wasn't comparing them to the Arabs. I was comparing them to the rest of the large nations. I'm sure someone looked it up. I looked it up, but I don't remember. But
on a par with the or above rather the average GDP per capita of the EU, above the GDP per capita of the EU.
Yeah, the total.
It's about $560 billion is roughly speaking the Israeli economy.
So
is that
bad,
correct,
huh?
Moshe?
I don't know, but I know that, yeah, I mean, people that in high tech making a lot of money, people that are not in high tech not making as much money.
And we have given Israel over $300 billion since its inception.
Okay, well, thank you.
No, I understand.
But Victor also see this as bad. I mean, I think Victor, maybe if the fact that they are breathing is also bad.
I mean, the other thing is that the Palestinian economy isn't able to grow because of the way the borders are controlled by Israel. And so they have a very codependent economy with Israel, as opposed to being able to build their own relationships internationally for trade. And again, like, I don't claim that there's no reason for that, right? The reason for that is Israel feels like its security would be at risk, because right now, whenever, there's a huge amount of attempted violence from Palestine to Israel, constant missile launches, etc. So that's where I say, like, win the hearts and minds of the average person by being defensive only. And if Palestine did that, I think they would win the hearts and minds of everybody. And there would be a need to, have a more peaceable, more opening up of the economy of the Palestinian
so let me ask you a question. So if you were, let's say, the Prime Minister of Israel and October 7 happened, what would you do?
You're asking me?
Yes. You say win the heart and mind. Okay. What would you do?
honestly, I wouldn't attack back. And I said that earlier, and I wouldn't have attacked back. Whatever I would have done, it would have been about, brokering a return of the people who were taken hostage. And it would have been about saying, this is unacceptable, and, this is going to set back, the establishment of a Palestinian state. And it would have been about, winning with love and compassion rather than with violence.
How long do you think that'll take?
What?
How long do you think that'll take?
Winning with love and compassion?
Yeah.
Well, let's put it this way. We've been doing violence for 3,000 years. Why don't we try love and compassion for 3,000 years, and let's see if
we
it
have,
wins.
Garrett. We have. There's religions that claim to be about that.
Until the
point
Arab
is-
economy in the
hang
region.
on. Garrett, if you would have been prime minister, you wouldn't have been prime minister of Israel because you don't have the right attitude. Israel's based on colonialization. Therefore, you would never.
Well,
be
but
elected
that's not the point. We're talking
as prime minister.
hypothetically speaking here. We're not talking about, whatever narrative you have. We're talking hypothetically speaking, if he was the president so it's kind of interesting. So 9/11, if you compare how many.
We have a line here? What?
So we
There's
do
no
have a
way
lot of
to-
hands up, Moshe. So raise your hand.
Yeah,
I
but we're
would love to
allowed
hear
to
what you have to
interject.
say, and you're welcome to ask questions, but I want to let Victor go.
Okay.
Every
so
time I make a comment, I
want to
lose my
address-
place in line.
Hello?
What's
Hello?
that?
Every time I make a comment, I lose my place in line.
So who is that spoke?
Daniel K.
Daniel, so what happens is, and I mentioned this earlier, if you speak, you will get a little notice that says, "Are you done speaking?" And if you don't say cancel, it'll drop your hand down. Like Zoom does this automatically. It's a terrible feature. Some product manager should be fired for it because like it screws up the whole line. And where were you, Daniel? Who were you after when your hand went down?
I was after Rossi at one time. I was after
Garrett.
George, but I'm after Jameson for sure.
Can I
So-
make a suggestion? Okay, here's 2 points of suggestion. First of all, you raise your hand, you get on the list, right? Okay. But if you've already spoken and somebody else has never spoken, then they are prioritized.
I do like that, Jacob. I just don't-
Suggestion number 2 is there's a green check mark. And what other meetups do, especially in a large group like this, because somebody has the floor, right, for a few minutes, but then somebody wants to make a less than 20-second comment. So they put the green check mark. It has to be less than 20 seconds.
We already have a process for that, and I already announced it. So I guess you weren't listening then, but I've already announced the process for that. So we have one. It's just to speak up. Like we have 3. We had at 1.3 screens worth of people, so we're not going to see the green checkbox. That's not a solution. So that said,
What
Daniel,
is the solution? The solution is just jump in. Is that what you said?
yes, the solution is just jump in.
Just jump in. Okay.
Yep.
But it has to be short.
It has to be less than 20 seconds.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank
What about the first suggestion?
Okay.
I like the first suggestion. I
on?
just don't have the ability to keep track of like who has not spoken because I'm focusing on what people are saying, not who has spoken before. So
Yeah,
if
but the
someone
group-
else wants to, like if Kay or some of my co-moderators, if Will and Kay can point out whether or not there are people with their hands up that haven't spoken yet, I think
Yeah, the group will tell you.
Jacob, Richard, I have to take care of a disabled roommate. I had a comment. I think it's important, and he called on me. Could we move on, please? So first of all, the issue that prevents the peace process is the role of the United States, right? It is not an impartial mediator. So what we need is outside mediators, like after the talks that occurred in Spain, things moved to Oslo and a peace process was initiated. So the first thing you need is outside mediator. Secondly, you need an immediate recognition of a Palestinian state. No more hesitation. A series of European nations are calling for that. Belgium, Ireland, Spain are calling for immediate recognition of a Palestinian state on the part of the EU. Third, you need once you have the recognition of the Palestinian state, you need an international force. The international force can be designed in such a way that it pleases both sides. In other words, there's certain forces in the ad hoc way that the UN composes these peace forces from certain nations, for instance, in Europe on the Israeli side, and certain Arab and Muslim nations on the Palestinian side. That would be the way to do it. The BDS movement is the basic response globally to Israel. It worked with South Africa. I do not think it will work with Israel because Israel has too many partners in Europe and the United States that are committed to it. So all we've had so far is B and D, and we haven't had the sanctions really against Israel on any scale. So that is not going to work. So the two kinds of solutions are one-state solutions and two-state solutions. The problem with the two states, well, let's talk about the one-state solution. In a one-state solution, you've got it. It exists. The river to the sea is the Israeli rights language from the river to the sea. It's not the language so much of the Palestinians.
Try to finish up, Victor. We're about at the end of the events, and I would like to let the people who haven't spoken go.
Given that it's settler colonialism, there's three possibilities in settler colonialism: apartheid, which exists, ethnic cleansing, which is now going on in Gaza, and genocide, which we are on the cusp of in Gaza. So the other kind of one-state solution is a binational state, which is what Martin Buber called for in the 1920s, a great Jewish philosopher, which is what Hannah Arendt, who wrote Eichmann in Jerusalem for the New Yorker, called for, and which is what the PLO called for until they accepted the two-state solution. The two-state solution is a hollow phrase. We use it over and over. It is not possible because of the facts on the ground, because of 700,000 settlers, because you would have to have a civil war within Israeli society to remove 700,000 settlers from East Jerusalem, okay, which is supposed to be an international city under the UN, and the settlers on the West Bank, the 400,000 plus
Okay,
settlers on the
Victor,
West Bank.
we need to let
done.
people who haven't spoken speak, Victor. I'm sorry. And just so you know, the two-state solution includes allowing East Jerusalem to stay Arab. So some of the two-state solutions have included that. So
35% of Israelis in the last poll called for a two-state solution. It is dead in the water in Israel. Dead in the water.
Okay. Thank you, Victor. And who has their hand up that hasn't spoken yet?
Stephen, Ben, Alex, and Kevin, and Daniel.
Okay, so we're gonna let those folks go. We're at 9 o'clock. I've been up since 4 o'clock this morning, so I can't go much longer. So
I can't believe you wake up so early all the time.
Right? I have young kids, and I have to get work done before they wake up. So I've been up since very early. So Stephen, go ahead. For the folks that did not, for the folks that have already spoken, please put your hand down so that I can only see the hands of the people who have not spoken. So only hands up for people that have not spoken yet. So that said, Stephen, go ahead.
I would say a lot of what I'm seeing is not going anywhere any good. As Hume said, reason is a slave of the passions. But one thing I notice is everyone's pushing a wheelbarrow. The underdogs are always against the overdogs. But I would say this, the thing I've noticed, presently, the people of Gaza are suffering, their property is being destroyed, their lives are being lost. And oddly enough, nobody here really cares. They're all pushing a wheelbarrow. So I would say an immediate solution is this. Israel has a greater power. So if Hamas really cared about the people of Gaza and really wanted to preserve their property and lives, they'll simply surrender to Israel. It's that simple. If you want to save the lives of Gaza, give up now and let Israel occupy and try and work out a solution from there, because Gaza was a free part of Palestine, but Israel has suffered because of that. And now they're going to be very hesitant about allowing a free Palestinian state. So that's my solution.
You could say the same thing to the Zionist
surrender.
regime. You could say they should back down.
Jacob, please
Thank you.
please don't interrupt.
You said that we can interject.
After he's done, not while he's still speaking.
I thought he was done.
Okay, yeah, I'm done.
He's done, man.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so what I'm saying is you could say the same thing about the Zionist regime. Why don't they lay down their arms, give up, go back to Germany, right? You could say the same thing about them, and then there'll be peace. It goes both ways, unless you have a double standard. Unless you're biased and prejudiced towards one side rather than the other.
It's not.
I think what might be another solution is what I proposed, which is that both sides hold on to their arms and say, take it out of my cold dead hands and just stay on their side of the border. And if they both stay on their side of the border and don't shoot across the border, then there will be peace.
No.
Quick comment.
No.
So it's my turn, I think.
That is divorced of historical context.
May I respond to that?
It's
That
also
said,
divorced
quick
from
comment.
reality of the occupation.
What's that?
May I respond to that?
Israel's occupying Palestine, so for them not to fire back means they're accepting.
May I respond to that?
Quick
I'm just
comment,
going to
Stephen.
say this.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to say this, so that I pointed out the issue is right now. The issue is presently Palestinians are dying, their property is being destroyed. And I've just noticed a lot of you guys, you just want to go back to pushing the same old wheelbarrow. I think present situation is the important one. People are dying now. People's properties is being destroyed now. We need a solution that stops.
So you're saying
right
Palestinians are dying, so they need to stop doing what they're doing?
Please don't
not correct.
interrupt.
The
Please
Israelis have to stop.
Please don't interrupt when someone is still speaking.
He finished talking. Ben should speak.
Okay, yeah, that's me, guys.
Hey guys, I've been waiting to make a quick comment.
No, Ben was talking. Ben S was talking.
Let Ben do his comment. I didn't realize that Stephen was done. And then Michael after Ben.
I have a brief comment because I've been in line for a long time and I've been bumped several times. The characterization of this as anything but colonization is deliberately presenting a false narrative. And I didn't see you use that term anywhere in your presentation, Garrett.
What do you mean by colonization?
Colonization is the domination and seizure of land and resources.
Right. So where do you see the colonization happening? Do you mean the settlements?
So yeah, there's clearly Israel is taking land. They're slowly encroaching. And every time you have one of these conflicts, it flares up. Israel encroaches a little more. They take a little more land, and then it happens again, and they take a little more. And it's colonization. There's no other way to look at it.
But don't forget, in 1948, all the land they took then. And what right did Britain have to give that to them, or the UN? What right?
Well, it's the whole Zionist project. The whole Zionist project has been to move people from Europe and other Arab countries into Palestine. Before that started, there was only 10% of the population of Palestine was Jewish.
Yes,
that's true. The whole Zionist project is a war against the Palestinians from start to finish. We're just continuing a continuation of this war. That's all it is. It's a shame. It's a shame to talk about Hamas as some kind of evil. That's just propaganda. That's just lies. The terrorism is carried out daily against the Palestinians. Daily.
So we're making
so George, just to be clear, even if you're right that terrorism is taken out daily to Palestinians, that doesn't mean Hamas is not terrorist as well. Those two must be true at the same time. And I would argue they both are true. I do think that the settlements, from what I've heard, there is, really more or less a type of terrorism happening to the local populations around settlements, I would agree with you, but that doesn't mean Hamas are not terrorists too.
To call
they're
Hamas,
responding to
well, listen. Wait a
They are
second. To call
they're
Hamas
responding
terror,
to-
hold on a second. Please, let me respond. To call Hamas terrorism is to say that the Palestinians do not have a right to defend themselves. To say the Israelis are carrying out terrorist activities, bombings, they're starving the population to death. To say call Hamas terrorists, they have the right to defend themselves. So you're ultimately what you're saying is that the Israelis are going to be allowed to slowly, ever slowly, and then accelerate their murder of the Palestinians, and they're just supposed to take it without doing anything.
that'd be like,
I think you're upset and you're angry, and I would encourage
that'd
you
be
to
like
calm
if China
down.
invaded the United States and the United States
Please
fought
don't-
back,
please don't
and then
keep-
people called
please
the
don't
United
keep
States.
Speaking over me when I'm the moderator, Jacob. That's gotten you kicked out a number of times, and it will get you kicked out again. We're near the end of the event, but I'm the moderator, so I speak up.
I'm a Jew, and I know you favor Jews. Don't kick me out.
Richard, enough. Enough. Thank you.
Hey, Garrett, quick
If I
comment.
can respond to your point, about my anger.
No, you've been making a lot of responses. Give other people the turn, please. Okay.
Wait a
sir?
second. Wait a second.
I'd like to support George. I'd like to
you're-
support George.
There's too much distortion.
Because
There's too much
Israel was massacring
Thank you, Garrett.
Palestinians right before the state was started, and including in all the wars. And I'll post a link for people to read from an Israeli historian.
If this was the Holocaust in 1940, I will be equally as angry and agitated as people are being systematically killed, women and children. Who's not going to get angry over that, Garrett?
George, out of curiosity, the incursion into Israel, are you saying that was defensive?
What I'm saying is that they're at war and Gaza is being starved to death. That is war. Like you said, if the Israelis really wanted peace, in response to that, they said, you know what? Let's have peace. Let's negotiate something. Because that attack did not come out of thin air. The Israelis have been slowly starving the Gazans for a long, long time. And
So you will
war,
acknowledge
Garrett.
openly that that was not defensive.
I'm not sure what that means, defensive. This is war. I don't understand what defensive means.
Who started the war? Who started the
in
war?
1948 with the Zionist project. That's when it started.
Is it the Balfour Declaration, 48, 67, 73? Where do you want to start?
What about 3,000 years ago when the ancestors of the Jews were fighting the ancestors of the Palestinians? Is that when the war started?
Yeah, how far do you want to go?
Going on for 3,000 years. Is the violence going to end the war? It hasn't
not
been
sure where your point
3,000
is there.
years.
Can I make some points?
The
Can I make
story
some
is
points?
that
Yeah,
the
let's
Romans kicked out
let
the Jews,
Daniel
not the
let's let
Palestinians.
Daniel speak, and then we're gonna close out, and we can continue this conversation in the online community. I'll put yeah, you're right, Trevor. It is unknown when it started because it was that long ago, before written record. I'm gonna put the links for the FTI into the chat. And then if you guys want to join the online community, I would love to continue this conversation there. Just remember to stay polite and calm. And so, Daniel, go ahead. Thanks for waiting.
First of all, I'd like to recommend an article in the New York Times, November 20th. I don't know how to post it. It's November 20th, 23. Was peace ever possible? The most civil discussion I've heard with 3 Palestinian intellectuals, 3 Jewish intellectuals, and a journalist. And it gives the history and the breakdown of all the negotiations. And Garrett, I think for your presentation, that should have been an essential component of giving the history of why those talks failed.
I did try to cover that. I'm sorry if I didn't cover it adequately, but I did try to cover it.
No, but I think that article will teach you a lot of facts and why it failed. It blames Israel for certain things. It blames Arafat. It blames the U.S. in the style. It's a fascinating article, give you a new perspective, and you might even want to follow up afterwards. But I want to make a few points.
Can you post it in the online community, Daniel?
It's November 20th. 23, was peace ever possible? That's the title, November 20th on the New York Times. Okay, this just a few weeks ago.
I'm out of New York Times articles.
It's a fabulous article.
I'll
Anyways,
try to find it. I'm in New York Times. When
just
peace ever possible.
I'm just gonna, but I want to make so many points, which there's so much distortion and misuse of terms. For example, the history of Zionism and the history of the wars, 48. I mean, like Jordan Peterson, who I disagree with so much he says, but one thing he said was very smart, which I think applies. He says whenever there's a narrative between an oppressor and an oppressed, okay, the oppressed is always going to win the hearts and the public relations. It's inevitable. So it doesn't matter how we got here. And clearly, October 7th was started by Hamas. And to dispute that, when they themselves took pictures of the horrific things that they did, and it was posted already by the end of October 7th, it was already online the next day. Now we're debating whether it actually happened, and we're questioning it. It's ridiculous. So, I mean, that's one action. I want to make another point. And that is, I spoke to one of my friends and said, you know how many Arabs live in Israel? And he says, there's Arabs in Israel? Surprised. And I said, yeah. I said, take a guess. Take a wild guess. How many do you think there are? He says, well, maybe 100,000. I said, well, there's about 2.2 million Arabs living in Israel today. Full citizenship. They may not be, maybe certain levels in society, just like we have in the United States. I think certain segments don't make as much money, don't get as much support, etc. So you have that issue in Israel as well. But clearly, they have rights. They vote. There's a Supreme Court justice who was an Arab. Okay, and I'm calling them Arab for a reason. And I said, what's the difference between the 2 million Arabs in Israel and the 2 million Arabs in Gaza? The 2 million Arabs in Israel are offspring of those Arabs that decided to stay in 1948. And they didn't go. They're the same Palestinians as the one in Gaza and the one in the West Bank. So the West Bank is offspring of those Palestinians that left Israel proper in 1948. So people talk about genocide, that Israel is out to commit genocide. It's very strange that from debating whether how many Palestinians left Israel in 1948, anywhere between 300 to 700,000 is the estimate. But let's even give 700,000. These 700,000 today are over 5 million people. To me, that's not genocide. So to accuse Israel of genocide is distorting the facts. Secondly, since this skirmish happened or war happened, there's been, I think the latest estimate, according to Hamas figures, whether we can trust it or not, is about 18,000 people, a lot of children. Let's not forget that half the population of Gaza is under 18. So clearly you're going to get, if you're going to get civilian deaths, there's going to be a lot of children. Close to 50% should be children if you're just proportionate to the population. So to me, that's not genocide. If you look at figures, every other war, I just saw today, in fact, I'm just trying to raise it up. The civilian death per airstrike in the 21st century global conflicts, okay? Mosul, Iraq, 17.1. Aleppo, Syria, 21.7.
Try to finish up, Daniel. I do have to close out.
Okay, in Israel, it's less than 4. Okay, no, I'm sorry. Wait, where is it? In Gaza, it's 0.8. 0.8. Okay, compared to any others, bombing. Okay, when United States bombed Baghdad, how many civilians died there? Did anybody give a shit about it? Did anybody make a fuss about it? So I'm just raising
2 million.
I'm raising a lot of issues that were not addressed tonight. Okay, so one of the things that has not been brought up is the intersection of Zionism versus anti-Semitism.
Try to finish up, Daniel.
Oh, let me just make a few important points to think about. Okay, and Zionism versus anti-Semitism, and it's a fine line. but a lot of people would argue that anti-Zionist in the way it's practiced is sometimes anti-Semitic. So you look at UN resolutions, okay, in 2022, there were 28 resolutions passed by the UN. 15 of them were about Israel, and 13 were about the rest of the world. And you go year by year in the United Nations, it's always been primarily Israel that's the issue, and almost all other factors were minuscule compared to the number of resolutions of Israel. So some people say, well, the United Nations is anti-Semitic. So, and maybe they're pro-Hamas, okay? They haven't helped Israel in terms of, Israel said, we're going to attack. What did the United Nations do? What did the Red Cross do?
Finishing up. Is this finishing up? He's gone on for another 3 minutes.
Daniel, I really have
Okay.
to close out. No, Daniel, I'm sorry. I have to close out. You're muted, Daniel. One of my moderators did that. Thank you. I appreciate your comments, Daniel, but I have kids to put to sleep. I've been awake since 4 a.m. and I got to put the kids to sleep. This is the end. So thank you all for coming. I really appreciate the comments, the contributions. I know we got a little heated, but I think it was overall almost all polite. And
thank you, Garrett.
It was very informative, and I appreciate the diverse perspectives we had. I hope everybody learned something, especially from the people that you disagreed with the most, because that's where we learn the most, is by listening to people we disagree with the most, and why they think what they think. We call that listening to understand in the Freethinker Institute. And so I want to encourage everybody to join the online community. If you go to freethinkerinstitute.org, you'll see links to our Discord community, which is the online community. We have a channel for the Tuesday night sessions, and you can continue the conversation there, and we can keep talking about it as long as you guys want. Next week, we're going to talk about determinism versus free will. I posted a link to that event earlier in the chat, and you can find it on Meetup. The week after that, for family reasons, I have to skip, but then the next meeting will be January 1st, where we'll talk about 5 simple rules to live a better life, which are about the FTI's 5 intentions, which are the common values of the organization that tie us together across political, religious, all, different ways of cutting and slicing and dicing life. These are 5 common values that any reasonable person can agree with, but they're tangible, meaningful, and will help you live a better life. So I hope people will come to that. It'll be our kickoff to the new year of 2024. So thank you all. I hope to see a bunch of you next week. Thank you all for your comments and contributions. And I wish you all well. Thanks so much.
Thank
and
you,
let's all pray for peace in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Can you give me 20 seconds to tell Moshe that all my sources were
Victor,
Israeli?
we put it in the online community, my friend. I really appreciate all your comments, but put it in the
Enjoy
online
life.
community. Thanks, everybody.
Not too angry.